Your cartoons are on. Meet Riz and Roz.
Okay.
Excuse me. Didn't give you that.
Well, it's recorded.
Great.
Okay.
There we go. This meeting of the Cuya Valley School District is in order. Pledge of allegiance, if you follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, boy, oh, boy. Well, thank you all for being here on this lovely Monday afternoon. We have some business to take care of. So, is there, to start off, a motion to approve the meeting minutes of our June 24th, 2024 General Fund Budget Extension hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Great. Any corrections or deletions or omissions that were found?
Pretty short.
Yeah. Okay. Not hearing any. All those in favor of approving those meeting minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. They're approved. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of our June 24th regular board meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks. Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any deletions, omissions, or corrections that need to be taken care of? Not hearing any. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes for June 24th, 2024, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. One more motion to adopt tonight's agenda. Is there one?
I'll make a motion to adopt the next agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any late additions or things that need, any members want to table for later? Okay, not hearing any. Is there a motion? There, we got that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion is, or the the motion's passed, agenda adopted. Public comments and questions. We don't have any board report, but Myron, do you have anything from inside that you want to say?
Not particularly, just we're continuing to approve students for next year, and things are looking good in that respect. So we're excited about the launch of the next school year.
Good. Well, we're excited about the launch of your school year too, and ours. Be here next week. Any other public comments? Nathan, nothing? Okay, then let's move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda.
Is there a second? Let's not argue about it.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions about it?
I think on the oven, we should probably check that out after it gets installed in the culinary class.
Okay.
Is that where it's going?
It's actually not going to the culinary arts class. It's going to the middle school, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
You know, I want a convection oven, but they're expensive.
Yeah,
Not-
obviously.
I don't want that big a one, but, all right. Any other questions? What was the change order for the carpet?
We had a small area that the subflooring was
Rotten.
Concrete cracks
cracks, yeah.
Oh,
over
And-
time.
We're utilizing our ESSER dollars, and so anytime you use federal money, even if it's a slight change, you have to do a change order.
oh, okay. All right. Sounds good. I was gonna say, aren't they concrete? But they must have been big cracks.
We had expansion joints and cracks, and they had to fill them all, so it took them longer. They didn't
Oh.
expect to have that once they pulled the carpet up.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Not hearing any. All those in favor of adopting tonight's consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Well, fastest meeting in the history of this board. This meeting is adjourned. And we'll go straight to the calling to order the budget work session for tonight. Topics tonight are the school EP&O levy and bond update, starring Corey Plager. Did I get that right?
Plager, close.
Plager,
Doesn't bother me.
just a good, not a Jill.
Yeah.
Okay, Plager, my apologies. And then a board work session on the budget. All right. And it doesn't look like we're gonna have any action tonight, so that's fun. So, I guess Corey, unless Diana wants to make some introductions or preliminary comments,
Yeah,
it's your show.
I just want to say that thank you for coming all this way, Corey, from the eastern side of the mountains. He said it is a reprieve from the heat.
You're lucky you weren't here last week or whatever.
Yeah,
week
wouldn't that be
before.
But Corey last visited us right before COVID when we were trying to figure out how to find money for the stadium. And so we went on a little tour and he thinks it looks great. Pretty sharp out there, and what we're able to do with our timber dollars. So he met with Jan and Kyle and me last November to do some pre-planning. As you know, our EP&O levy is coming up that we'll put it on the ballot in February, well, as long as that's what you want to do. And then looking at our bond history and where we're about to retire our bond, although it looks like it's so far ways out, it's really around the corner. And so I'm
How
gonna
far out is it?
he'll show you,
Oh,
about
okay.
2027, yeah.
Well, and I was lucky to have a visit with you in November. We were
Yeah.
just kind of doing a check-in. I had a meeting in Aberdeen. I thought, oh, it's just right up the way. Go visit. And that's when you invited me back to talk about, you're kind of in a prime position to talk because even though the bond matures in 27, it flies. So I think too is that bonds, if you kind of treat them like they are in a silo, all of a sudden you get upside down with your levy. So you kind of got to think about them together. Since you're about to set your levy to renew, keep in mind what the bond goals are at the same time so you don't, go too deep for the levy or too shallow at the levy and then the bond. We're just here to talk big picture stuff right now and kind of plant some seeds. It's a lot of information. So as we go through this and you think, oh, there's a lot. We're still early, right? You have a lot of time to absorb this and talk it through, but stop me with questions. And I'm just going to go through 3 sections here. Hazel, you can skip to the next slide. We're going to do a levy and bond overview. We're going to do a very brief recap. Bill, I know you were here for the last bond, but it's not, usually
It's all news to me.
well, it's been 15 years, right? It's something, you do very infrequently. So I'm going to do a brief recap. Then we're going to talk about your property taxes because everybody has an idea what the property taxes are. I brought the stats and the data because sometimes we get caught up in what we think it is, and I'll show you what it actually is. And then the final thing is Diana asked me to bring some information on local effort assistance, remind you what it is, how you get it, and how you might be able to get more if that's the board's direction. So I'm going to go ahead and dig in.
And just so you know, they've done a great job planning. They have a 20-year facility plan, and we really keep our eye on the mark with that so that we're able to utilize our local dollars for our facilities. That's why our facilities are really in good shape. And that I really attribute that to the board and their forethinking. So we're constantly looking at that to make sure that we're in the mark.
Well, you might be wondering, where is John? Is he slacker? He actually retired. So John Gores, that helped you with the previous bond, retired last January. So I mentored with him for 5 years. Before that, I worked 15 years in an educational service district. And so we merged up together. And so I'm here because of his mentorship, but I just sent him a picture from the stadium. All you can see was the logo. And I said, guess where I am in Forks? So he just knew right away. And there's a couple Spartans across the state.
And John was really instrumental in helping us get my first bond passed. Our first bond passed in 2008, 2009.
Exactly. So this slide is just a really quick recap. It's really good for, at this stage of the game, education programs and operations levies. These used to be called M&Os. So if you remember maintenance and operations, you have a couple extra copies with that.
Yeah, anybody in the
Hard to see.
audience wants one of these, yeah.
EP&O levies, we renamed them because maintenance didn't make sense because a lot of schools started passing capital levies. They have a maintenance levy and a capital levy. Well, that's what we kind of rebranded these about a decade ago. We call them education programs and ops levies. These are for learning. These are for textbooks. These are for athletics. This is for art classes, drama classes, music classes, things not funded by the state. And the state doesn't do the greatest job of funding you for basic education or curriculum or lights or electricity. So it is also going to some of that as well. But you do have some discretion as a board about what you're going to use your levy for. Unfortunately, it's not all at your discretion because the state's not doing the best. You are subject to a lid. You cannot ask for whatever you want. You are not near that lid today. I'm going to show you that in the future, but your lid is $2.50 for every $1,000 of property value. You do these for up to 4 years of collection. I believe you have been doing 4-year levies in the past. So you're probably due to renew it for 4. It is a question that I get asked a lot though, is should we do 3-year, 2-year? I like 4 because then you're not wearing people out with asking them for taxes. And you just need simple majority, 50% of people plus 1 to agree. Some districts are starting to be more frequent with capital levies for technology, safety, security. So they're actually asking for a levy that's just dedicated to facilities. And a lot of those folks are doing that because, as we know, our facilities are aging. So been a little tough across the state. Our state isn't the best at giving us money for HVAC or carpets or roofing repairs. Also, simple majority. And what we're going to focus on a little bit more today is bonds. Bonds are for buildings, whether it's new construction or renovation. These could be up to 40 years. You think about like a 30-year home mortgage. Some people like to do 15 mortgages if they can, but the average for schools is 20. I think your last one was about 20, right in there. And the problem with bonds is you need 60% of people to agree to pay taxes to fund that. It's hard to get 60% of people to agree on anything, especially taxes, but you guys have a pretty good track record here. This debt capacity is not a recommendation. This is telling you what you're legally allowed to sell bonds based on our state formulas, 44.6 million. That doesn't mean that that's going to be something that's tolerable or, requested by the board because it could result in a tax rate that's above.
That's ours.
That's your debt capacity, 44 million.
Build a school for 44 million these days?
Well, we know that we did some preliminary numbers with OSPI and could potentially get about 15 million through SCAP, which is school construction funding. Yeah. Didn't he say about 15 million, something in there?
Well, and we talk about how time flies. Your last bond was approved in 2009 for 11.5 million. You can see what 11.5 million plus state match got you last time. You're correct. It doesn't go as far as it used to. Inflation's been pretty painful here. That bond is also eligible to be refunded in 2026. So about a year and a half before it matures. So we'll be keeping an eye on it, letting you know if it looks good for saving the taxpayers money, that bond back in 2009. What I mentioned earlier is that you've had a really good success rate. In green are your historical EP&O levies since the turn of the century. You'll notice your EP&O levies, no red. Every single time you've asked for a levy in the last 20 plus years, the voters have said yes in numbers that far outweigh your peers across the state. The average right now is below 60%. And you'll see the bond. It took a couple years. It took November of 2008, then in February 2009 for it to pass. So I think that's a typo there. I think it was.
Well, we had to.
We had two propositions. We
Right,
had
we
the
had to
school
take-
and
we had
the
to take one
stadium.
off.
Yeah, okay. So
And then
correct.
we kicked the stadium to the curb.
The stadium was the 47% one?
Mhm.
Yeah. And you found another way to do it.
Yep.
But overall, there's some schools that it took 13 attempts to pass a bond. There's some schools that took 1. We worked on the Bremerton issue, took them 1 time. I worked on another one, 13 attempts. So
Wow.
it's just 2 attempts. That's pretty darn good. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's not always a slam dunk unless the community is really excited about the projects that you're proposing.
Our last one was a downtrend though.
The EP&O,
Mhm.
yeah. And
It's a
that,
little concerning.
well, Corey will
That's
probably
post-
talk about that across the state.
Yeah, that's post McCleary, and so you can see that the slide that Hazel put on the screen in slide 5 is showing what happened. So in the very, your levy did go down to 59%, which many schools would beg for. Centralia had a double levy failure below 50%, or Yelm just had a double levy failure. So to be at 59% and have that be a down year is pretty good still. But look what happened over the last decade. Levies were just doing great in our state. So I work solely in Washington State. 98% of all of our levies were passing. We had 1 double levy failure in a decade. It was a really small school on the Columbia Gorge. And then McCleary passed. And for those of you who remember, McCleary was now education's fully funded, but they raised taxes for everybody. And so there's a lot of stuff in the newspaper that says you're fully funded. And then you ask for your levy in 21. That was your first levy after McCleary. And so people are remembering, well, you're fully funded. You don't need this money from us. This is just extra. And their taxes went up. So you can see statewide, there's a dip on page 5 that showed everybody ran into the same challenges. Districts like Bellevue that were getting 70% yes, they got 52%. So you, by staying up at 59, is showing that your community support has been superior to many schools. But we're getting back, we're recovering. Capital levies we're recovering. One more page, you'll see on page 7, the bonds have always been difficult because this is 60%, but we're seeing some recovery. We're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, maybe some pressure relief on inflation, maybe getting through all the challenges of COVID, but 29% of bonds passed in our state in 2024. We have about another 10 more that are going to try this presidential election, so that'll be exciting. On slide 8, it's just a quick recap. If you are a municipal entity like a library, a city park, or a county sewer district, fire department, this is the primary way that you use the community support to build infrastructure. And that's through an unlimited tax general obligation bond. There's no really alternative measure for this. Some schools that have either federal property or tribal lands have some other options, but this is really the primary way in collaboration with the state matching funds to build. Your bonds are tax exempt. So you'll hear a lot of folks say, it's now the right time to even be talking about a bond. Interest rates were 7% for my car loan. We're still in the 3% range for school bonds. So we just did Bremerton about 3.5, 3.9%, I'm trying to remember. And what you do is you get all the proceeds up front. When you issue a bond, you get the money at once, whether it's 15 million, 20 million, and then the tax holder, the property holders pay you annually. You use that to pay back principal and interest of your bonds over a time period. You don't have to wait like you do for an EP&O levy for those funds.
And our principal payment is roughly 1.1 million a year.
Right, for the 11 million.
Mhm.
Missouri bond is quite unique. But you'll see this map below. Washington is also unique where we're in green. We're one of the states that requires 60% supermajority. We're like Iowa, Mississippi, Tennessee, and the Dakotas. Most states across the United States are in gray. Those are simple majority states like Montana, Texas, Oregon are all 50% states. So a little more challenging here. And that's something that's been up to debate for changing or not. But it's in our Constitution, so it's a pretty difficult change to make. Diana just mentioned the amount you're paying in principal and interest per year. This is on slide 9, shows you that your bonds there's a step down in 2028 and then they fully mature. So the question would be is, when is the perfect time to run a bond? I would say you could begin anywhere as early as 2026 and anywhere as late as 2028 to kind of avoid some of those, your taxes to go down. That's sometimes a challenge when the bonds mature. And you go out to the voters and say, please vote yes, but they like the new lower tax amount. So sometimes the strong message is, are you supporting us at the current level? Do you like the current level? Can we do this project at current levels? So that's one strategy that's been really strong in the community when there's a little bit of sensitivity to taxes.
So out here on our peninsula, in our area, Cape Flattery and us are the only ones who have a current bond. It's been challenging for Port Angeles and Swim to pass them, although they've tried, but they went up for capital levies, but you get a lot more money in a very short period, so there's limited things of what you can do.
Yeah, Port Angeles has a capital levy. It was a 6-year, and that's about to mature. So they're looking at the bond to replace that. What options do you have available? So this is more of a focus on the EP&O levy because you're heading into, in 2025, your final year of your education levy. So one of the board's decisions will be is what dates do we want to submit this proposition to the voters? Historically, you've done February in almost every single election dating back to 2003. And you'll see on this slide why most people choose February. And that is because in green, 95.9% of levies pass on their first attempt. Now, another thing to think about is for any reason, let's say there's a hiccup and it doesn't pass, you have these 3 other elections to choose from. There's a lot of criticism out there that say you should only run in the general election. Well, that's great, but that you only have one shot at it. So a lot of school districts pick February. That's the most common election. And then if there's a challenge, they can always go April for the second attempt or November for the second attempt. You only get 2. And bonds, capital levies, they all do best in February for schools. So not really giving advice there, but I would just say most districts go in February. So if you're looking at running in February, that means that you're going to need to have some ideas of what you're going to do here in September and October with your tax rates and your amounts.
But if we went in November in general election and didn't get it, you still turn around and do it in February?
It would be the year later, so you don't miss a whole year of local taxes.
Well, if we went out in November right now, that would be a lead. That would be 1 for this calendar year. You can go for 2 for a calendar year, and our levy straddles 2 calendar years because of our fiscal operation. So we could potentially go for it in November, but we'd have to have everything ready to the county
Next
by
week.
August, or next week, and that's not feasible.
Yeah.
But
We've got some planning to do. So let's say we went out in February, ours ends December 31st, 2025. Is that right, Dan? So if we don't pass it in February, we have to get it done in April, or else we're not going to get our levy collection for the full year and our LEA that next budget
so
year.
we just lose a year. We wouldn't lose a full 4 years if we fail a 4-year levy.
No, you can go twice a calendar year. We have
Right.
to go back out, but that's not a good scenario to be in. Part of the school districts who are in binding conditions, that's one of the factors. Like if you look at Moses Lake, I can't even remember all of them.
Marysville.
Marysville, yeah, that's one of them. Like if that happened to us, we would potentially lose about 4 or 5 million out of our operating budget.
But the question about November, some schools like to go early. November's a little tricky to go early because you still have 13 months of your next collection. It is tricky enough to run it in February 25 because you still have a whole year of collections. So people are like, why are you asking me now? But that's just how government works, right? We need to do things so far in advance. But if you did run this November, it's 13 months before your levy expires. It's not, it has some challenges, but it's not out of the question should the board want to go that route. It just means that you need to get started and have a campaign ready to go before the school year starts.
And get the message out of what it is and what it isn't. And that's what we'll be doing, working on aggressively.
So now I'm going to get into some of your details. This is the size of your tax base. If you're a property owner, you may have noticed in the last 2 years, your property values have skyrocketed.
Yes.
And you are about 4 million shy of $1 billion in assessed valuation. So you are very close. I would imagine that things aren't slowing down too much or going negative right now up in this area. So it's very likely you'll be in the billion range, but you end up 16.8% this year. You are unique though. And Hazel, if you go to the next slide, you're going to see me split up that same exact chart with timber value. So it's not just coincidence that they're green and brown like trees. They're kind of reversed, but we're headquartered in Great Falls, Montana. These are our brand colors. I always have to use these colors in our presentations. But in green is your timber value, and in brown is your AV. And you'll notice that the timber values fluctuate pretty frequently. So it's actually a pretty difficult estimation to make and forecast in the future. For example, this year, TAB is 25% of your tax base. So if you look at 2011, TAB was 13% of your tax base. It really depends on yield, right? How much of that is actually getting collected. And we know there's been some environmental policies that have kind of, slingshotted that around a little bit. So we use some conservative factors forecasting forward, but it was a really good timber value year in 23 that impacted 24 taxes.
So do we have any idea what 2025 would be like?
It would, if we had somebody we can interview at the county that's looking at yield, because right now, if we talk to them and said, how did it look just behind us, that's what's going to impact 2025 taxes. So they start to cut off information this summer, usually July 31st. So they have a good idea if they're willing to share with us, but sometimes they wait because they don't want to open up any cans of worms, and then all of a sudden we're asking a bunch of questions, but they know.
Yeah, and we're now getting, we just received communication on them where they think we're going to be this, but I think it's in 2024 where they said we're going to see another increase. I think almost a 25% increase if I read it right. So we are getting communication in the timber assessment.
And yield for timber.
Yeah.
Which anytime they do more yield in timber, it takes pressure off homeowners. Because if we levy $1 million even, and you see that percentage change, That means they.
Ours goes down.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
collecting the same amount of money that the voters said they would pay for, so if we get more timber dollars, then your amount per thousand goes down. And that's what people do not understand. We don't collect more money from our taxpayers when their assessed value goes up.
Well, that's a message we need to remember to say.
Yeah, we'll come up with 3 probably very simple messaging tactics when we do this, and then make sure that it's
So-
consistent.
So why the big increase in AV?
Well,
In your estimation?
I guess in hindsight, I would have never guessed this, that when we went through the pandemic and people could do virtual employment, I don't think we realized that the impact on housing values outside of urban areas would be impacted. Think about Cleveland, Washington, think about even like along Westport, people that were fleeing these urban areas, whether it be Olympia, Tacoma, and Seattle, to go live where they've always wanted to live because now they're remote. And I think a lot of the assessors in these areas out here and where I live were behind. If you used to look at your property value in 2018, you would never say, I'm never selling it for that. It's way under market value. And the laws have been changing recently to get assessors to get closer to market value right along the time that the pandemic hit. So I think it was a perfect storm. My property value has doubled in 4 years. And it's like 5 years ago, I would never sell it for what it's assessed at. And now it's assessed here, and I'm just kind of mad about it, right? So now it's right about what I would sell it for.
And then quite a while ago, I think around 2015, they assessed our property every 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
And then there was a change in legislation where they had to start doing it yearly. It kind of made people mad out here because we weren't used to that
King
system.
County is negative 10% last year. So you're asking, why is ours going up? Well, theirs going down. So it's just, there's some interesting things happening statewide.
Sounds perfect to me.
Why is it going down?
It's negative 10%.
People were moving out of there.
It's all based on real estate value. So whether or not they hit a peak on housing, it's a great question, but the assessors went negative 10%. I work in Snoqualmie Falls, which is just east of Seattle, east of Issaquah, and they went down 19% in property values. Kirkland was negative 9%. But there's still $1,000 million. This shows your history of levies. And one thing that I think you would notice is it's not keeping up with inflation. It's very level. Inflation used to be not as big of a concern. Look at like between 2010 and 2012 and 2012-18, we just kind of updated it a little bit here and there, but it's been very flat since 2018. You have that 1 year in tan is your last year collections that the voters have already approved. So that year of 25 is when you're going to spend your time trying to get that renewed. And if you ask yourself, what's the levy lid? I mentioned earlier, it's $2.50 is the levy lid for RCW. That's 2.1 million. So right now you are about 40%, 35% of your levy lid. So if the board says we want to run the most we can, it would be $2.1 million. That would be almost triple what you have today.
And if we did that, we would still get state matching funds, but
Correct.
only to a certain level.
Your actions, if you maximize levy lid, would not eliminate any eligibility on LEA.
But we would, the levy, what do you call it?
LEA, local effort
Yeah.
assistant.
That is, there's a top to
There's a
that.
threshold.
There's a
There's
top
a
to
top to
it.
that.
And you need to do something to earn it. But you can't jeopardize it by asking for lid. You can jeopardize it by asking for too little. They say
Right.
they want you to have skin in the game, and I'm going to show you the formulas coming up.
Okay. So if let's just say, if we'd gone out for 2.2 million, which was, that maybe was the lid at the time, we would, and the max was 715,000, that wouldn't change.
You still get all the LEA.
Okay, gotcha.
If you ran a levy right now for 2.2 million, the county would step in and say you're above the lid, and they wouldn't let you collect it all. They'd only let you collect 2.18. So they'd roll you back 150K.
Okay.
If you're curious about where this falls, I have a slide coming up that shows you compared to your peers in the geography here. But in 2023, OSPI released a report that you are ranked 146 in the state. Out of 285 schools that have levies, you are ranked 146th from a tax rate perspective. So almost smack dab in the middle. Port Angeles was 82nd. Crescent was 257th. Cape Flattery was 79th in the state. So just kind of fun facts there. I had a slide earlier that showed when schools started failing levies. And so you won't see here the same dramatic percentage that you will see across the state. But on slide 14, you're going to see your levy divided by your tax base. Look what happens when your tax base goes up. Your tax rates have declined every year for the last 8 years. You're now at $2.06 this year. I forecasted 2025 just using, I think, 2.5% growth next year, really conservative. So even if you slow down, your tax rate's going to level off and to be around $2.04. But you were at $3.80 before McCleary. So that could be another reason that people are supporting you. But this slide shows an overlap between what the board can control. In green is your EP&O levy, in tan is your bond. Now you're going to see these gray colors. In light gray is your state school tax. Always been there. That's how we fund basic ed. If you're in Bellevue or Lake Washington or Bellingham, or if you're in Forks, you're paying that light gray amount to the state. And they made a brand new one in 2018. And that's when we started failing levies across the state, is because people saw that dollar increase. What other schools haven't been doing that you have been doing is decreasing your rate locally. So you'll see that you're getting it back down to where it was previously. The question would be, is are people's home values going up faster than the decrease in the rate? And I can't say, that's really personal for each homeowner. This chart we call the community trust chart. In green is what you put on the ballot, and in the brown color is what really happened. I think it's a little confusing because they dance all over the place, but what you're going to notice is that the leadership team here has done a fantastic job of estimating what those tax rates were going to be, and are usually only off by 1 to 2 pennies per year. So if you're wondering why you're getting such good results, this could be part of it, is that what you put on that ballot actually comes true, or you overestimate on that ballot. For example, this year you said it'd be $1.19. Because those property values went up and you can't ask for more, the tax rate goes down. And that's what Diana was talking about earlier. It's pretty complicated. Okay, here's your peers. I told you where they rank, but I didn't show you the numbers. This is just for your information. I'm not sure this really pushes strategy or changes what the board would like to do, but sometimes it's good to know what your neighbors are doing. You know what your school students need. You know what your community needs to do for your education levy. However, this will just show you that not everybody is on a fair playing surface. You'll notice your tax base that's in Clallam County is about $750 million, where you see Port Angeles has $6 billion to tax. So these districts with these really big tax bases have a little bit of an advantage where they can spread it out over more businesses and more homes. So that could be challenging. So it's not always apples to apples.
That's why we're called, and we get LEA, that we're property poor, if you hear me say that.
So before I leave the data page, any questions on the data? A lot of information. Now it's at your fingertips for when you want to refer to it. And I can always come back before February as well.
You know, one thing I would just say, that he showed you where the McCleary, the gray, what the state imposed. And you can see that top one kind of dipping down. That's where they talked about the cliff. And then when we hit COVID, they put in ESSER dollars. So that kind of carried districts over where that dip was. They called it the McCleary cliff, but that funding would go down. And so that's part of the reason why you're seeing some of the schools go into binding conditions. But you can pull up your own tax. When Corey talks tonight about what we might have to raise to maximize our local effort assistance, and you could actually go to your tax statement in the Clallam County and just apply it to yourself so you could see what that might look like as a sticker shock. In fact, I would say that would be our next step as individuals who care about our community and what message we send. Let's see what it would do to our own property taxes, and could we handle that as individuals before we would figure out where we're going to land when we ask for a dollar amount. We're going to be doing put together here are the items that we see we need to utilize our LEA and our levy collection like we typically do, and then we're going to see where that number is into what we would request. and what more we could get from the state to maximize that dollar. But that would be something that I would say we would want to do.
So why is Chimicum and Quilisi so high? They're small schools, they're small villages.
I think a lot of it too is geography. Like you think about Chimicum has a pretty large region. Some schools are just blessed with a big geographic boundary, so they just take up so much more. If there's more frontage, like there's certain places that, like look at a Hood Canal, and they might not be big geographically, but they have a lot of lakefront homes, and each one of those are $1 million plus. So that could be it with Chimicum.
Yeah, the Chimicum, there's a lot of development. I only know this because I know somebody working in construction where he came over and said, yeah, I just put in $1 million driveway. So there's a lot of multi-million-dollar homes out there that are way more expensive than what we see out here.
And there's commuters in Chimicum. Their enrollment is, I work with Chimicum, their enrollment's been declining for a decade, and it's really challenging for them to just stay relevant with the funding there. So let's talk a little bit about LEA before I give you those estimates on what you might want to do or might consider for your replacement levy. On slide 18, Diana talked about this. We need to use this property poor description. I went to a property poor school district that received LEA, and it was one of the most beautiful places in the state, right? It's 9 Mile Falls, Washington. And we said, we just kind of redesigned it. We said, we're not property poor, we're industry poor. We don't have an aluminum plant. We don't have Microsoft at the distribution center. We don't have a Home Depot in our backyard. So we kind of changed it. We're actually property rich. We're just industry poor. And so we as homeowners are usually the ones paying the bill. So we try and change that a little bit, but the state in RCW calls it property poor districts. And they say we have this resources that we created in 1987 to try and build equity for students' access to extracurricular activities, arts, drama, music, those programs that aren't funded through basic ed. So on the next, so one thing this slide says too is that districts must pass a general fund levy to get it. Diana mentioned if we fail, we lose our matching funds too. So it's pretty high stakes here. To qualify for the full LEA, a district must certify a $1.50 levy. This is where it's a challenge right now for your school district because your levy is actually dropped down to 82 cents. Your property value is skyrocketing, the timber value is skyrocketing, has dropped your rate down. So you have to ask yourself, what are your options? Well, bring your levy up. So you have to raise taxes to maximize funding, or if you're friends with the legislator, we've been trying to push on them. The laws right now create it to where I have to raise taxes to get what funding you budgeted for me. Change the law. Change it to 75 cents as a floor, change it to $1, you name it. That's the other thing that can be on your plate at this time in the game that would make it so you wouldn't have to raise taxes. But right now, that last line says you're only getting 54% of the LEA that the state budgets for you. And if they don't use that money, it just goes in the rainy day fund, right? They just get to use it how they see fit.
Goes to Bellevue. Okay.
No, it goes to Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's your history, and it's a little frustrating. You'll notice that in green is the amount that you have received into your pockets here for your kids and your community. And you'll notice the old model from 2014 to 2020, right there, that's when McCleary changed the formulas. It used to be they compared you to Mercer Island, they compared you to Issaquah, and they saw the ratio between your home value per student. And after they changed McCleary, they just said, nope, we're going to compare you to yourself. Anytime your property values go up faster than inflation, you're getting richer. So last year when your property values went up 18%, they think you're 18% richer and you don't need their help. They didn't realize it's just a mathematical formula that the ESSER just checked on a box. So they said, you are 18% richer, school board, just go tax them 18% more. It's easy, right? So that was the old formula didn't do that. They compared it to Seattle. And if Seattle grew faster than you, you needed more. They gave you more every year from 2014 to 2020. And now you're getting less every year because you are becoming more rich as a community compared to your prior year to yourself. And that's pretty frustrating. And they made the new law that you need to have a $1.50 levy. So Hazel, if you go back one slide to slide 20, you are leaving this year on the table $2.2 million, and that's not to your fault. That's because of a law that's quite arbitrary that says you have to tax your people a certain amount. You used to tax them $3 per thousand, but the law back then didn't care. for rollback at that point. We had a different formula. You used to roll back 100K, right? Or 300K any given year. Now it's $2 million because your property values are skyrocketing. You're property rich.
An industry port.
Yep. Okay, this is a visual on what would it look like. This is just an example that I came up with just to spark conversation. This is your history that I showed you, but this has a replacement EP&O example and a bond example. And there's two things on this slide. In green, I made the assumption that you would like to maximize your LEA. You want that $2 million back. And for you to do that, you would need to double your levy. But if you double your levy, you get $2 million more in LEA as the formulas currently sit. So you see in 2026, I have that green go from that 80 cents to $1.50. So that's my first assumption. And you'll see your bond goes through 2028 in tan. In blue, I forecasted what would happen if you replaced your old bond at the same exact tax rate as that old, the new bond is the same rate as the old bond. This means your rates would be at $2.75. So that increase from $2 to $2.75 is you getting your EP&O back up to maximize your funding. So this is just an idea to show you what it would look like, but you might ask the question, what does that bond create? And Dan, I don't think I've told you this number yet.
I haven't. I'm afraid to look at that, honestly.
Give a guess. Do you like to guess? Do you have to play these games? Or just tell you?
No, I would. It's not on there. I would say probably an additional $3.
It's 20. That $1.25 bond. I was going to say
Oh,
it's
for how long?
23.1 million.
23.
million. So now you have your 15 million to it. That's 38
I
million.
won't get you anywhere near it.
It's a good chunk of change, but what do you need to do? So if this model right here, and I just used a 20-year example at the $1.25 bond replacement, 23.1 million.
What if you did a 30? Does anyone do 30s?
Yeah, I've done a couple 30s.
What's
It
the
just means you pay more
downfall of doing a 30-year?
More interest.
Yeah.
But the tax rate comes down. It's like doing, how we used to buy cars over 4 years? Now, just do it over 6 years. It's easy. It's cheaper.
But you pay more.
You pay more.
But then you gotta think about 30 years out there, when the bond comes due, what's our other buildings gonna look like? Like the primary, or the-
Elementary school.
That'll be somebody else's problem.
well, I know.
No,
you're
we're
right,
doing
but-
our long-range facility capacity succession plan, so we keep this going.
So
Right.
Wait, before you move too far along, what were you talking about, 38 million? I lost you in that.
I
Yes,
would-
15 plus the
your
23.
local, what you can drive plus what the state will give you in match would equal 38.
38 over
23
what
and
period?
15,
20 years.
20 years,
Oh,
build the
okay.
school.
38.
to build them.
Yeah,
middle
yeah.
school.
So yeah, it'd be 23 that your taxpayers would generate, and that you would tax them to pay back that 23 million over 20 years, and then whatever the state match, which is you said 15-ish.
Yeah,
Why do you say 15 inch?
we did a preliminary session with OSPI because we just did our state study and survey to get the ball rolling, and they projected, and it's a formula like everything else, and they projected what it would be.
And where's that 15 million coming from when it comes from us?
It comes from our
Mark
timber,
tax-
our
it comes
timber
from the
dollars.
Timber dollars.
But we have to apply for it, and then the state has to award it to us. There's a whole
Okay,
process.
so
we
that's
go
not
through.
coming out of our tax base, that's coming out of the
No,
timber.
that's coming out
industry.
of different set aside
That's coming
land,
out of harvest.
Yeah.
And the state.
common
Okay.
schools.
Common schools.
And then just to give you a kind of a ballpark, so Stilica, I'm good friends with the superintendent there, and they plan for a middle school to hold, I think, 250, about the size of ours. And and this is several years ago, maybe even right after COVID, I think it came in at 65 million. And then they pared it down and they got it down to 45 million, but that was 3 or 4 years ago. And then they did.
But they did without a roof.
There's no running water. One thing that I will share is I am a conservative numbers person. So I assumed you only had 3% annual growth in your community tax base. So the last year you had 3% was 2018. So I'm being conservative there. So that means I'm projecting you at the low end 23 million. If your community keeps growing, new businesses, timber yields higher, that 23 can get to 25, can get to 26. The second factor that I used was that interest rates would go up 1.5% between now and 2027. That if interest rates don't go up, you could get 25, 26, 27 million. So I would say right now, my estimate for you is it's a floor. 23 million is a floor. I'm trying to manage expectations, but it could be higher if something changes in the White House and all of a sudden inflation is under control, we're going to see interest rates come down a little bit. So I have it built in interest rates going up in your model. If they stay level or go down, all of a sudden that's 25 million.
I see.
So we can keep revisiting this number every 6 months and update you like, okay, this is what it looks like as you build your strategy.
So I think I've asked this before. So the assistance money, the levy assistance for the local area,
Local effort assistance.
effort assistance, who's filling that pot?
State of Washington.
Taxpayers in general?
In
Out of
general,
general
across the
fund?
Mhm.
Okay.
And lottery proceeds, cannabis taxes, state sales tax, B&O tax.
Okay.
It's a pretty
Big pot.
elusive pot, right? It's
Okay.
But the theme, we don't pass the EP&O levy, we don't get the LEA.
Right.
We don't pass the bond, we don't get the timber dollars. That we've been afforded to build a stadium, that does not go into your debt service into your debt service fund. And I asked Corey, where does it go? Because I asked a million people, where does it go? Where does that money
Where does
go?
what go?
Because they're going to continue to harvest our junior
Right,
taxing
right. Oh,
districts,
right.
in theory.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it goes across the county, right?
to my knowledge, if you were all different entities, sewer district, fire district, parks, and you all had these
Hospital.
levies, hospital, and they're doing this yield, they're splitting it up to each of you based on your debt, based on your levies. So if you have the biggest levy of all 7 of you, you would get the biggest share of the yield. And that would take it. So that's how I see it. So this, all of a sudden, this square of the table isn't pulling, then all 5 of you would get more for you'd be prorated your share. That's how I understand it to work.
And so,
You
Kyle,
get that from the county,
Said
right?
they were gonna, that was up for discussion committee.
yeah, so Kyle and I sit on the revenue assessment committee with the county, and that's one of the things that will help them, guide them, make decisions on. But again, if we don't pass the bond and or the LEA, we don't
We
get
get
those
nothing.
junior taxing district dollars. That's a big deal for us.
Big trust.
Over the last 10 years, we've received over 9 million. I don't know, something like that, 9 or 10 million. It's a lot of money.
Hazel, can you go back a slide? To generate, do you see the amount in red that you're leaving on the table? If you did increase your levy, as I mentioned, you would go from $700,000 levy in 25 to 26, about a $1.4 million levy. You would generate 2.2 million if the formulas were similar. That 2.2 is fairly flexible. Should you earmark $500,000 of that per year for the next few years for capital projects to help offset future construction? Should you use it for athletics? There's some flexibility with LEA, but that's the number. I told you 23 million for the bond. The EP&O levy is about 1.4. So you would have to double your local levy to maximize your state formula. So another way to put it is for every $1 you increase your local levy, you would get 3 from the state.
I thought when we went out 4 years ago that we were maximizing the LEA. Did we decide not to maximize it?
I think we got lost in the shuffle of COVID and McCleary. It was in 2021, and we did minimal to figure out what that was. I didn't bring anyone here. It wasn't really on our radar, and it should have been. And they had changed the way the whole formula worked too. And we just, again, coming out of COVID, we were just happy to get it out there and pass it.
Right, and so as a result of the next 4 years, the assessed value of everything is what's then created the distance between maximizing and what
Because
we're
they're
asking.
comparing us to
'Cause
us
that's
now.
yeah, right.
And you're not alone. There's 50 school districts in the state losing money right now. And I've talked to several legislators and I said, there's one easy fix you can do. Change the prorated number from $1.50 to something else, and you'll take care of all your rural schools, and it's got no play. So I'm not sure if you have some
It's
influence
funny
in
because
the area.
there's 250
Half.
rural schools.
Half
Yeah.
half
So-
of 295, yeah.
So your argument today could be, if you go to your legislator, say, we're gonna raise our taxes by 700,000 unless you can help us, because we want to maximize that 2.2 million that we're eligible for based on us being property poor.
And we're gonna blame you, state.
And Corey, if we doubled our collection, do we know what dollar per thousand that would be per home?
Yeah, $1.50, right? So you go from 82 cents to about $1.50, and then you have no wiggle room, right? If property values keep booming, your $1.50 becomes $1.40, $1.30, depending on your growth factor. But right now, we're using 3% growth, that'd be $1.4 million.
But you know, we used to be able to sell the levy at $1.50. You know, because we weren't raising it, but it's been going down over the years due to all these other factors. So
That's gonna be a challenge.
the sell will be to
Mhm.
convince people to go back up to that
Yeah.
$1.50.
And if you go up
Rather than, we should have been doing it maybe all right along, because it's just a replacement.
if you go to $1.25, then you're gonna get that percentage of the $1.50. So take $1.25 divided by $1.50, and that's the proration share of your state you're gonna get. So you don't have to bridge the gap all the way, but if you want to maximize it, $1.50 is the key, or getting a lot changed.
Well, what too is confusing when they put the McCleary tax on, it raised it
Mhm.
also, so
Yeah.
people were upset about that.
And they
because
thought we were doing
we were
it to
doing
them.
it, and we weren't doing it, that's a different portion to fund the
Yeah.
salaries. And that was like 80-some cents, wasn't it?
Sounds dishonest to me.
Yeah, about a buck in the beginning.
Yeah.
All right.
So a lot of information. One thing that came up earlier is timing. You can see for a February election, you need to know what you want to do by December. So that first column is your 4 election dates. The second column is when the board needs to get that resolution filed with the county. So you see, you don't have to solve all the world's problems today, but you need to adopt a resolution in November, the end of November or beginning of December for what you want to put on the ballot. If you were considering a November of 24 election, it's not on this slide, but you can see August is the filing
Yeah.
deadline.
We can do that.
No.
I've taken up enough of your time, but I will share one fun development since your last election is now we have these voter pamphlets. Have you guys heard about this yet? Maybe
No.
WASDA. Our laws now show that the voters pamphlet used to be an optional thing. It was required for all federal things. So you see it for the president or you'll see it for your congressional things. But now even a school measure is going to be on the voters pamphlet. And it's your job as a school board to advertise for the for and against campaigns. So you have to find somebody that wants to be against you and make sure they're aware that they can fill it out. So just.
And we did that on our EP&O levy,
21.
and we couldn't find any
Yeah.
against. You put out a
Good.
formal
I mean,
solicitation.
There's gotta be somebody.
I think the key is making sure that people are aware of the opportunity, because people will come and say, you didn't try very hard, you know? And I think the key is you need to make sure you show, and it has to be people within your county. So it used to be, the state just changed recently, the law. It used to say in last year, it could be somebody from Seattle that could be against your levy because they're on a part of it, you know, a team that does, you know, tax initiatives. But the key is make sure you get that advertised and posted.
Well, that's interesting.
It's your responsibility, not the county's, which I find odd.
Well, that's okay, because it's.
We put an
important to
ad in
us.
the paper, and I think we put it on our website, and we didn't get anything, so.
I personally think that it'd be easier to find people against your measure if you weren't the ones trying to find them. I think if the county was doing it, it'd be a better process for people that were really feeling it, because it's hard to come up here to you guys and say, yeah, I'm against what you're doing. But if it was an intermediary doing it, that's why I think the law is funny. But just want to remind you that this is your duty to find people against your tax measures.
So if we don't find anybody in the voter pamphlet, it just say it can post.
It's blank, and then there's criticism of why did the district find somebody.
All right, well, let's find somebody. I'll write it.
A lot of information, but any questions, again, hopefully I planted some seeds for conversation.
Yeah. Good.
Nightmare.
We have a lot of work ahead of us.
But you've had a great supportive community, so that's one thing that you could take away based on that history and that trend. Find that sweet spot of what they support.
Well, we gotta show them results.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
Yeah,
stick around and have some dinner. I'm hungry.
Yeah, I think that, but if it's okay before we start the next section, if you want to grab some food,
Yes.
all of you guys. And then I might even have for the next work session, have my team come sit up here. if you want
Oh, we
with
got
us.
room.
Okay.
Oh.
Can you put
And we
us
can
on
hear.
pause so they don't see us eat and mute us?
Ish.
You know what I realized? I don't have my agendas. I printed those out. I'm gonna walk over to my office and get them. So they're
We're back.
Me, vocals.
We're back.
You want to welcome everybody back?
Yeah, hi Diana, why don't you bring us into the rest of our work session?
Okay, so thank you all for being here. In front of you have an agenda. This is mainly to keep me on track. And then I just would, first of all, like to thank my team, Lindsay, Jan, and Kyle, who really helped me put the budget together. There's many pieces to it, and Kyle's learning all of the pieces as well. So there's two of us through what potentially could be challenging times ahead, although I don't see it. And then Jan is really instrumental in getting everything in this system. So Lindsay's role is to put all of the personnel contracts in the system, and then those are moved over to Jan's side where they merge. And so that's why these two are really important to the whole process. So I thank you guys for your hard work. I think this is the earliest we've ever put it all together. Really had a chance to look at it. There's couple of funny things about it, but I'll explain that as we go through the whole process. So as you may or may not know, the real instrument that drives our funding is enrollment. And so it's been a challenge for us. I'm going to show you a couple of different things in the budget process where it looks like this year, I think we're going to be about at 64 million, where last year we were at 48 million. But our challenge is really trying to gauge where our ALE online enrollment is with Insight, because it looks different each year for multiple reasons.
What's the brick and mortar of that?
So if you go to your notebooks under miscellaneous, you're going to start at the back. Go to the very last tab. And the first thing in your folder is enrollment projections. And I just you can say that's too much information, not enough. Stop and ask questions at any point. Anyone might answer, but our ALE enrollment is different than our brick and mortar. Brick and mortar, we get about, 14,000 a head? Is that right, Jen?
I think so.
Somewhere in there. And that might be different because if you're a special ed kid, you get additional dollars. If you're a CTE, career technology education, you get a little bit more money. If you're a multilingual learner, we get more money for students. So again, 14,000 is about the average, and that looks different in every school district. Our ALE, per head, we get 9,956. 9,650. They just increased that. Yeah, but the reason they don't get as much funding is the state believes that it doesn't cost as much to run their programs because they don't have facilities, they don't have athletics, they don't have all the other components. So, by the way, this is combination. Lindsay usually puts the enrollment projections in, and then Myron helps with his side. And then Jan puts us into what's called the F203, so we can get our apportionment, what we're going to get from the state funding. And
I guess it's 10,000.
is it almost 10,000? So if you look all the way to the left, you can see where our brick and mortar FES, FMS, FHS. So look at them in columns. And so we are projecting a head count of 852. And our full-time equivalent, which is what we really get funded on, depending on how much they're here, is 800 and, wait a minute, nope. 846.
Plus 14. Plus 14.
Oh, plus
Yeah.
well, but they get the ALE funding.
No.
No, they don't now.
No,
Never
we're
mind.
homeschooled.
Okay. So 846 plus 14.
860.
Yeah, so you can see where our deficit in our enrollment is 38 full-time equivalent. I don't know if that's enough.
That's just the junior, that's probably about just the junior.
I think we're
class.
looking at 52.
Yeah.
So if you do 52 times 14,000, you're looking at about 500,000.
52 what?
Running
52
start kids.
full-time equivalent students
Running start?
in Running Start that are going to Peninsula College instead of Forks High School. They are choosing that. then we're seeing about $500,000 worth of funding leaving. But Kyle said
Where did
most
you
of,
get 52?
So 38 there.
30 is
Forty.
the actual,
40.
is the actual number of probably the junior class right now. So I didn't have the senior, the expected senior class numbers,
Oh,
projections. kind of.
52.
So-
Holy
we're
moly.
starting, what I had Brenda do is go back and meet with every family who were either new enrolling and then to educate them. The legislation absolutely allows any student to go over to the college, any student. It used to be that they screened them. They had a really, what I would call stringent process. It is not that way anymore. So it is a direct competition for all high schools across the state, and it is devastating many of the schools, especially small schools. Port Angeles is hit by it, Sequim is hit by it. Everyone is facing the same challenge. And again, if we were to interview, and I know that part of what Brenda has been doing is working with families, finding out why. And she's hearing anything from, I don't have to be in my seat for 40 hours a week from 7:30 a.m., 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. It gives me flexibility to work, do other things.
Is it better for the student though? That's the thing.
It depends.
I know. I mean,
depends.
it's
Mature
not
enough.
better for the student. They should.
Yeah.
College doesn't care if they flunk out. It's a
No.
business.
They just want the
They're
money, yeah.
My hope would be that we do everything we can to attract students to stay in school. And so if it means that we need to do focus groups with our kids to find out what do you need, what would attract you, better CTE programs that prepare them for industry standards. I know that the superintendents across the state have asked for flexible seating. I don't think flexible seating is necessarily the right way to go. But again,
Flexible seating, how would that work?
Like
And
a
kids could,
beanbag or something?
no, where kids
Sit anywhere you
could
want.
take half of their classes virtually and still get full funding, that kind of a thing. Again, we're talking a hybrid COVID type program, and I'm not sure that's the answer too, but something's not working.
Well, we're basically losing a generation of kids that are gonna go to, for several more years, we're gonna go up. But anyway, that hasn't got anything to do with budget, so.
so where the running start kids reflected on that enrollment sheet?
Look down at the RS.
38 and 2.
Oh, got it. I see it. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
By the way, this is a workshop. We've submitted an original draft. Then we'll have a chance to change things. We may change some things before adoption, and then you're gonna adopt the board hopefully at the hearing on the 29th, Monday the 29th. So we might make some small tweaks. That might be one thing we want to tweak,
What's that?
the number of full-time equivalents in Running Start. Our Homeschool Plus, remember we shifted a lot of our population from the alternative school into a Homeschool Plus model. They get decreased funding, but if they're not attending every day, then we needed to change our practices. So for QVSD, if you look at the overall, we're looking at 891 FTE that we will be funded by. We could potentially, I think, have 930 some if we recaptured any of our Running Start. Now, if you look at Insight, so we were challenged this year and we had to do a budget extension because we were 400 over. And so one of the practices that they are changing this last year, they only allowed students to enroll in specific times, like they had their high schools on a trimester, so they would only let them
At the beginning.
at the beginning, and then once again at the beginning of each trimester. They're opening it up wide to more flexibility where a kid can enroll at any time.
How is that gonna work with hours and keeping, geez, what a nightmare.
My assumption would be the rationale is that the trends across the nation show that kids are opting out of their brick and mortar school after the second or third or fourth or fifth or
Week?
month or 2 months, and they're going somewhere, so we might as well capture them. That's my assumption. And if you look at,
Were you involved in that decision? Or was that
No,
something that they
That would,
unilaterally
that
did?
would be corporate and
Yeah.
would be a company stride decision.
Okay.
And so knowing that, we started out with, I think, 8% less, and to build capacity, I got nervous at the very end. I said, let's put an additional 8%, what Myron gave us. And then let's put an additional 3%, because I really do feel that that open enrollment is we're gonna see a
Big
bloom
change, yeah.
in numbers, but I could totally be wrong. But that way it gives Jan a lot more flexibility for budget.
Sure.
So stay tuned on that one.
Okay.
So the next sheet in the back of your folder looks like this. Open it up. It's called the Budget at a Glance. This kind of gives you the 10,000-foot view of where we've been from year to year. So for example, we're looking at a $65 million budget. Last year it was 49. Remember in 2022-23, we projected large enrollment and it didn't come in, but it did give us a lot of flexibility. And then you can see what our state apportionment is, our local tax revenue, our levy equalization, exactly what Corey was talking about tonight, our special ed state and federal dollars, and then all of our categorical funding, our percent of free and or reduced meals, projected enrollment of our students, and then our actual certified employees, classified employees, and then our total salary and benefits and the cost of that, and then our purchase services. So just take a minute to look over that, and you can compare anything for 10 years. Then if you have any questions, because I'm going to go through a lot of this throughout the presentation.
That ESSER dollars was quite a bit.
Yeah, it really was. And we had to expend them by the end of this school year. But you can see we had almost 4 million. And again, that's why a lot of school districts in last year, they spent them early on in the first 2 years and then they tanked. That was part of it. Yeah, and then just.
Where are the ESSER dollars reflected?
They're after in that categorical funding, right above early childhood program.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
So yours are done. Spent them all.
everybody's are done. Mhm. Well, we do have a challenge with our buses because we asked for blue color buses, or vans.
Oh.
Buses, minivans. They may not get here in time, and then we're gonna have to, I don't know what we're gonna do.
Horses.
No, it's just a matter of when we get them, we can spend them, we might have to move some money around, but we'll figure that out.
That's not too hard to do though, is it?
And then,
Wait a minute. Why would we need to move money around?
Different fiscal year, right?
You have to spend the money
Oh.
by a certain time, right?
yeah.
Oh, we haven't spent
So they
it.
were
We spent it on
earmarked
delivery?
vans,
We do a purchase order, but until we actually
We
see
have
them
it,
and
you
get
don't-
them, we
yeah.
don't spend it, yeah.
And why are they slow? Because they weren't painted the right color?
Bruce told me because we're the only ones that are gonna have blue vans, everybody else has white ones. And because we put in a special color, it's taking longer, and I'm like, good, then we'll stand out.
I'm gonna take white.
I'm glad you didn't pick pink.
And then I would just show that even though our local enrollment has declined, our certified employees remain fairly steady. Some are averaging around 90, 91, you can see over the years. And then our classified employees, we have pretty much remained steady as well. Although I will tell you that it is more challenging for us to fill all the positions that Lindsay and Jen have put in the budget. So I'm going to show you the overall cost for salaries, and the actual is probably not going to be what we think it is, because we either won't fill positions or we'll have staff members who don't attend regularly and their paychecks are affected as such.
Is there that, the declining enrollment chart, is it in here?
It's not. We should
No,
look at
yeah, we
that.
should probably show you over the years the declining enrollment, but it really paints the picture of what's happening locally with our community with Airbnbs. There's not affordable housing, the cost of increase in our housing. Middle-class families are not moving in.
There's no jobs.
Yeah, and there aren't jobs, and it's a concern for our local school.
Well, we're down to 200 or 300 students since I started, since my kids started.
Oh, probably way more than that.
way
I
more.
I guess
bet
we had
600.
1,600,
Yeah.
so probably 600 or 700 less.
Yeah.
So out-of-state property owners, are they getting charged taxes on these Airbnbs?
Well, they're getting taxed on their homes, but it depends on what our, if you've noticed in the paper, my understanding is that now Sequim, Port Angeles, surrounding cities are putting very strict guidelines around it. We have not done that in Forks, so I don't know if they're getting taxed or not. It depends on if they are registered. If they're not a registered Airbnb, then they're not gonna get taxed.
And it's good luck getting that through Forbes.
And so the city is the one who imposes the regulations on Airbnbs, and they are my understanding is they're very minimal, but I could certainly have a conversation with the mayor to bring more information back to you.
Yeah.
And it's a double-edged sword, because if locals are making money on it, you want our local community to have money. But on the other hand, it will start affecting our patronage at the hospital, who goes to the hospital, and then if they don't need more workers, then it's gonna affect our schools and who moves here. So it's
Well, I
kind of,
heard if the county commissioners adopt it, then the whole county's gotta do whatever.
Not in the city.
no, it's a city ordinance.
It's the city, not the county.
Well, him should go.
Unless you're in the county, then it would maybe be county. I don't know how that works.
It is. Those are city limits, though.
So we are projecting 20.4 million in salaries and benefits. Does that include all of our substitutes,
And that's just us.
miscellaneous?
That's not ISW, because they're a separate entity. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money to pump into the community.
And then we're looking at 44 million in purchase services, and the majority of that goes to Insight. So I'll show you what that looks like.
Okay.
Any questions on this?
Yeah.
Okay, don't wait. Shannon might have one.
Me? No.
Oh, okay, good. Any questions? So before I start getting into the next sheet, which is our fund revenues, and then we're gonna go into the budget, just a reminder, the budget is a plan. And where Jan's done a good job logging all the revenues with the help of Kyle, me, and Lindsay. Kyle and I look at all of the expenditures and all the grants, because we have different coding for different grants, different purposes. Lindsay, of course, is in charge of all the personnel contracts. We do the best job we can projecting revenues and expenditures, and really Jan does a great job capturing all of
We've been real close
those.
over the
Yeah.
recent years.
And then we do the 5 funds, the general fund, the ASB fund, the debt service fund, transportation, which this year we will have a new bus. We'll be purchasing a new bus. And then capital projects, we have heard from the RCO office, Recreation and Conservation Office, and our grant is submitted, and they are looking at it, and we have some amendments to do. That's for the 1.5 million for the fast pitch and baseball fields. But this year, we're gonna need to do the engineering for sure. Again, get a project ready to go, and you know how it works with us, we'll figure out the funding. And then potentially the Forks Elementary School roofing project. 2.5 million sounds like a lot. Remember, it's all the equipment on top. It's not just the roof, it's all the engineering of it.
We spent $1 million on the bathroom, 2.5 on a roof. It's nothing.
We can't get a football team together, maybe we don't need a baseball field.
Maybe not.
We'll see. So, Jan captures a lot of the general fund, the funds in the general, and that's the next item there. A lot of it is through apportionment. When we put in the enrollment, on the F203, she can see what the apportionment is gonna be, but there's a lot of other local, so if you look at local taxes, local non-tax, one thing I would like to point out to you, if you look in the second column, which is local non-tax, halfway, well, about 2/3 down where it says investment earnings, 540,408. So currently in the county treasurer's office, we have about 10 million sitting there. 9 million actually, I think right now. And I think Jan projected we have an end fund balance of about 9 million. She's always very conservative too. We sometimes see that higher than what it is. And the interest rate in that is 5.5.
So,
And that 10 million sitting there from a bond or?
This is in the general.
No, this is in the general fund. So it's
Yeah.
money that unless we can track it to local funding, we have to spend it on
cool.
Like improvement.
instruction,
Oh, instruction,
students.
not building.
So back up to the local taxes. Why is it, why are the timber excise tax lumped in with what I'm thinking are the levy monies? Because isn't 714 about what we get every year for our levy? And
So timber dollars come in there, timber excise tax. And if you get more timber excise tax, it lowers what we collect from property taxes. So you're actually,
okay, so if we get less timber tax, then that local property tax number goes up. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
because it was like, when it first started, it was like $1.19 and it's dropped down to like 80 cents.
Yeah. All right, I just was curious about the, gotcha.
So that one other additional thing that you need to think about, and I know I always do this in my enrollment report. So whatever we budget for our money we get from the state between September and until January. So if we budgeted that high number of students, and even if we don't see them, that amount of dollars, we're not going to send the projected enrollment number to Insight. We only do the actual number. So if we have more money sitting in there between September, October, November, and December, you're going to see that 5% increase our investment earnings. So we upped our investment earnings this year. Last year, I think we had, what'd you budget, 250,000?
Yeah.
And we did a little formula to figure out what that might look like. And we're probably going to see more like 540,000. I think on this month's budget, we're almost at 420.
Yeah.
But you just factor that into the overall money coming in. We don't have to do budget extensions or anything for it. Yeah, okay.
No. We can get as much revenue as we want. We just can't expend more than we budget for
Okay.
in any of the funds.
Cake sales. Huh?
Yeah.
Maximize.
Our transition kindergarten, another good example in special purpose state, 203,000. That's paying for itself. And then you can see a lot what we put on that budget at a glance. I'm just trying to think if there is any federal forest dollars. We've seen an overall decline in what we get through the federal forest because they're not.
What are all those percentages over in that column mean?
Indirect rates. So that's the percentage that we get to keep. We keep that money
for our
indirect, like admin expenses.
Oh, I see.
For the time that we spend on the grant.
Okay, so that's
district
all
office.
right. Okay.
I'm trying to think what else you would want to see here. One on the second page, Insight School of Washington, you might see that 34,000. That was actually, we negotiated that in our original contract to pay for my assistant who helped with Insight.
I don't see where that is.
On the second page. And then you can see what our co-op brings in for transportation, the 34,000, 5,500, and 38,000. It's about $70-some thousand. But any questions then on, or this is again in the general fund.
What's that outdoor school thing do?
The grant we received for our middle school science program at
Yeah.
Nature Bridge.
Nature Bridge,
Yeah.
we've got what was it, a 30 or $40,000 grant?
Is that the Salmon Coalition thing?
No, it actually comes out of the Recreation Conservation Office. And I don't remember how that came about, but we've been very active with Nature Bridge. Sometimes they bring people, well, they actually do. You actually saw it that one year. Do you remember when we went into the middle school and they had animal skeletons and coats? Yeah, that was Nature Bridge. And so that cost about $38,000 and we got that grant for it, so why not do that? Anyway. Okay. So let's go back into your, then let's go to the front. No, yeah, let's go to your first page in your general fund. And it's page 1, yeah, it looks like Jan and I have the full budgets, which there's a lot of information that, little details you don't want, but it looks like that one.
1 of 1, fund summary.
Yeah, where you can see the general fund. And so I'll give you kind of the highlights. We're expecting 65 million over, and we're thinking that we're going to spend over 66.3 million. And if you look at our deficit of 485,000, I really don't think that we're going to see that. I think we're going to see probably closer to our revenues, what we're getting. But again, we're trying to be conservative, and really, truly, that's an indicator of our local budget of losing 52 kids to Running Start.
Yeah, because it's about 537,000.
But the other thing that we knew is that increasing salaries, I got the sheet in front of me, we were projecting for this current school year, if we funded everybody, almost an $800,000 increase. Wait a minute, no, hang on, let me do the math here. About a $700,000 increase for this year. So it's a combination of things, but overall, if you're looking at our undesignated unreserved funds and we can only spend most of that on instruction, we're in good shape. Right, yeah. If a goal would be, for me, I would like to see our high school really focus on figuring out how to better engage our students so they wouldn't want to come back and be a part of our high school. To recapture those dollars. And so our beginning fund balance, again, Jan is projecting around 10 million. If we would look at our ending fund balance at 9 million. The change this year is going to be, it's going to look like we have less unrestricted funds because we are looking at a $65 million budget. Our board policy states that we have to have 5% for restricted. So it's going to look, so that's going to be a larger number. Jan, do you have that number?
Yeah.
So it's going to look like we lost some of our unrestricted, unreserved funding when in actuality we didn't.
Yeah, 3,315,000 is what our.
And currently, I think we're at
balance.
2.4 million.
Yeah, we budgeted 2.7, but.
So then if you go to the next page, you can see that the difference between 2022, 23, 23, 24, and 24, 25 to get a feel for where the changes are when we're looking at revenues. And again, the biggest driver that we have, which is different between the 2023, 24 and this current budget coming up, is that FTE, the enrollment in our ALE program.
On that 22, 23, is that a typo on your staff?
It's because they pull in from the S275.
They pull in Insight.
And Insight is included in the amount that's reported.
Okay.
So we have 90 certified staff in brick and mortar, and when we budget, so part of Lindsay's role is she reports on the S275, and we have to report how many full-time equivalent employees we have and where they were teaching. It's a whole bunch of stuff.
So,
We don't bring that in from Insight until, because they're contracted services, until the beginning of the next school year. So it looks like we have doubled employees. So if you go back to that budget at a glance, well, maybe it's not there. Let me see where.
Yeah, it's not included.
Still pretty consistent, right?
Yeah.
It's always that way.
so our enrollment's dropping. We got a lot of people going to Insight, but we're not reducing our staffing at all.
That may be something that we want to consider. And two things that I can think of, and then Kyle, I think you would probably know better too. I will tell you our students are more challenging in some ways. And then some of our staff attendance patterns are also challenging. And so, I mean, given all of that, reducing may not help for what we need for daily care of our students. I don't know how else to say that.
No,
You said it
Supervision.
perfectly.
that sounds reasonable.
And we're
If they're
hearing
doing
that
something.
consistently. One of the things I think that has impacted our ability for management of students with discipline is the law change during COVID, where they put these really unrestricted, or restricted on us anyway, of when you can exclude a student from schools, and they were really intending it for it to be on the I-5 corridor, the larger schools that are much more hard to manage when you have populations of 3,000 or 2,000 in the building. But we've seen some negative impacts because of that with discipline.
Well, and then just the need to offer diversity at your high school. So because you need to offer diversity with what your course offerings are, you're gonna have a lot of staff with small student body.
That comprehensive
Yeah.
high school component. Mhm.
Can you explain one more time that FTE certified employees, 2022, there was 199.9, and then this year is 91.8.
So in this year's budget, we're just budgeting for brick and mortar. But the way the state makes us report at the end of the year,
Oh, that's okay.
yeah, we add the Insight School of Washington. Those are called contracted services because we don't employ them. Stride does. Then we still have to report them as services for our kids, and we have to do the same thing that we do for our certified staff members.
See, in 22-23, it says actual. So
Yeah.
it's capture what we actually reported on the S275, where then next year you'll see 23-24 will be actual, and you'll see that number inflated by 100.
Insights.
Although we pay them who purchase services.
Yeah.
You don't see them in the salary.
And then you can see that we don't report their classified staff. They have classified staff too, their registrar, people who put in data and everything, but we don't have to report their classified, just their certificate. I don't know what the rationale is behind that, other than, I don't know. Do you know?
It's just the way, I guess, the state's only going to fund their.
Yeah, the state only funds certificated, really. They don't, remember, in our school district, they fund 7 of our classified staff, and we have 76. So the rest of that funding comes out of grants and our local dollars, our levy.
They don't have to put them through the fundamental course of study, and that'd be fun.
I'm trying to think what else would be important in the general fund. Jan, what else would be important? Or Kyle, because you saw it as a once time. Some of our categorical funding are going down, like our Title one, but we're not seeing it this year because we have restricted carryover that goes to those grants. And we're not 100% sure why, other than our loss of enrollment. And then some of them have funny formulas that include other factors, census data. And so we're thinking some of the census data of the Forks area, because we've lost a lot of families, could probably be driving that.
Title one went down, right? Jen?
Yeah, and it did go down,
And
although
rural
Diana
schools
had
went
mentioned
down.
the carryover
Yeah.
we have.
And now we'll start spending our carryover as long as we hire all the positions, because our salaries have increased a little bit. And as long as our staff attend regularly, when they don't attend regularly, then, and they lose any of their sick leave, then they go unpaid. So we saw some of that.
And then we pay extra for travel.
Yes. If we can find them, yeah, but we do, yeah. Okay, and then we have our ASB fund, if you want to flip to the next.
I got one question.
Yeah.
Purchase services,
Oh, yeah.
we go from
Yeah,
18% to 66%.
Oh.
that's an error.
Oh, I meant to point that out. Jen, you want to explain how that, what happened there?
Where are we here on the front?
It's on the last page,
Yeah, and
3
you
of
see-
41.
I knew there was something else
You'll
that we
see
needed to
travel
explain.
Has gone up in our,
What's that?
you'll see travel is 23 million.
Yeah, I looked at travel. too.
And, it's my error when I did the budget extension. I put it in the wrong optic code. So I've been working with the ESD and we've got, communication with OSPI. We'll see if we can correct that. But I mean, it's a.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were saying.
Yeah.
Come on, let's go to
So it
Hawaii.
really should be probably,
Philippines.
I would say 150,
For a year.
140 that should be in travel and the rest would be in budget services.
Pretty big increase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not seeing.
Trips, so
We have a lot to look
planning.
forward to. I'll come to
Yeah.
meetings.
So
Very
that-
good. I'm glad you brought that up because I was trying to find where that was. I had forgotten that.
So
And
we do have budget.
we're hoping there's an easy fix where we don't have to bring it back to you.
Yeah.
That just,
Oh, I'm sure that's no biggie.
Yeah, the OSPI, I guess, was, that's one.
ASB.
Mhm.
I think it's more realistic
You
when
don't
we look
have
at the
that
math
first
back,
more pages.
What's more realistic
where we're budgeting.
this year?
This year,
Mhm.
in
We
24,
budgeted
25.
way much.
When you look at actual and it's, the ES.
And of course, those are revenues that are through student funding, the clubs and everything.
Mhm.
And we don't charge
No.
students to do anything.
No. The law changed
Right.
3 years ago?
Not even
Yeah.
for gate.
Yeah, you could charge
No,
them,
that's
but
good.
it'd be
We're
like,
hoping our gate
That's the way it ought to be.
will increase this year.
Yeah.
because you can only charge students that
Well, with the new stand, it should have increased a little bit
need it to figure.
because we only had one game or two games there with the new stand. But it was pretty well attended.
I think we had 3,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then we get a
Yeah,
grant
I
too.
mean, yeah, I guess.
Okay, so then
Compared to
You go to summary of debt service fund budget, that's the next tab. There's our local taxes that we collect. So we're looking at revenues of 1.3 million and total expenditures, so you can see our bond payment. Trying to think. Where do we see our timber dollars, Jan? Is that 3,000? Oh, that's the 3,000.
That's the 120. But where are you looking?
Yeah.
At our-
No,
our
the
bond
3,000 state general purpose, that is
Oh, yeah,
our
yeah.
junior taxing district.
Mhm.
And so we did not collect as much this year as we did obviously in the 2022, 2023 school year. Jan, what's our actual number on, we're gonna get to that here in a minute, on 120. We're above 120, but not much, right? Can't remember.
No, actually, we aren't as of June. We're only at 104. Wait,
Huh?
just a second, make sure that's state forest, yeah. It's as of June.
Yeah, so we haven't quite met what we thought we would there. But in looking at what the county projects, we're gonna see that number go up this next year. And it's gonna depend on the sales, when they sell, and then they have 2 years to harvest, when they harvest, so there's a whole lot of wiggle room. But they're tracking the sales very closely. And again, there's a lot of emphasis on the junior taxing districts being at the Board of Natural Resource meetings because there's a lot of pushback from environmentalists to continue to log And then this is I call it our honey pot, where we accrued that 2 point some million, where then we were able to transfer that for the stadium. So again, we're gonna have to watch it accrue, and then that's the importance of passing the bond. If we redo the bond, you don't have the bond, you don't see those timber dollars coming in, even if they're harvest, which is a huge loss. And I do agree that that's part of the message that we're gonna need to get out to the community, and show them over the years. I really do believe, I think I looked at it over 10 years with all of our timber money, it's been about $10 million. So we want to hang on to everything that we can get that's local.
Yeah, I had no idea until I.
My husband didn't either, yeah.
No idea.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and the message that we give is that matching fund isn't from, those matching funds aren't from people's taxes. They come from things like the gambling and marijuana tax, and I think that's important to let people know, because they may already, like I did, I thought it was just coming, all those monies would just be coming out of the general fund, which I'm paying for anyway. So, I'm still paying my taxes for it, whereas this is for people who are, I guess you call them sin taxes as much as anything.
Yeah.
And that'd be an important thing in the message, I think.
Yeah, I thought I had transportation next. So go to capital projects next. I guess I had this out of the wrong order. So we are budgeting, we're 2.75. Is that, we're hoping to get grants for our,
Yeah, no, I put that in the state grants
yeah,
for the RCO, the 250, and then the 2.5, assuming that we would get one of these.
get one for
The small schools grant or
Yeah,
one of the.
we're hoping to apply for a small schools grant for the replacement of the elementary roofing. There are gonna be some grants coming up for small schools. But to kind of finagle with that, because we're a mid-sized school district with Inside School of Washington, but we've been able to pull it off in the past to get small grants or small rural school grants. So we'll see how that plays out. And our architect, Jay, is gonna help us look for grants for that replacement. And so the key and critical thing is getting the engineering done. We're just about done with the engineering, aren't we, Jim? I think so, yeah.
Quick question, all the way back on the page, to the summary. I was just thinking about the replacement money we're saving for the field. I think that's that other financing uses.
Assigned to fund
30,000.
purposes?
Oh, yeah.
Other financing transfers out, $30,000.
Mhm.
Is that what we're saving for
The field.
the field in the future?
Replacement.
Mhm.
Okay, well, inflation being what it is in all 15 years is 30,000. Do we need to, at some point in our meetings, consider raising that?
That's probably, we're gonna have to ask Field Turf.
Wouldn't hurt to do a little
Some of the
investigation.
No.
investment earnings that are coming in.
What's that?
From our bond fund,
Right,
We're getting
but I'm
some.
just thinking,
84,000 is what we projected.
So if you look at our overall ending fund balance, we're currently at 720,000, projecting to be at the end of the school year, 720,922. And I think the replacement cost originally was gonna be $500,000.
that's what I think we were
Yeah,
planning for.
yeah. And we're almost we put it in 2015, so we're at 10 years. They were expecting that we would have to replace it in 15 years, but every time they come out, they say, you're probably gonna be one of those anomalies where it's 20 years. 20 years from now. But that's a good idea to look into what it might cost.
We've been starting to have more seams,
Tear and stuff.
repairs, yeah. More than it used to.
I'm pretty sure they originally projected $500,000.
Right,
Doesn't that
that's
sound
what
right?
we acted on, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Well, down the road, we might want to think about that.
But again, in the capital projects, we're seeing that increase in our fund balance, where we generally have not had anything but about 200,000 at the most, I think. So we may want to up that. That's a good point. And then last but not least is transportation. And so you can see our depreciation for 23, 24, and I think, did we get that in August? We're gonna get 120, I think we get more than 125,000, didn't we?
This year we'll get 200.
Yeah.
Next year, this is.
Why will we get 200 this year? Because of the number of buses that are
I believe,
depreciating.
I'm not, how they depreciate, I'm not.
From my understanding, they increase that, they're trying to increase the transportation because everybody's complaining about the way that transportation is lacked in funding, but it could be because of the bus and then the IPD, the cost of increase in living and everything. Yeah. And so we will be purchasing another bus. Did they already approve that? Yeah, you guys already approved that, but it doesn't come till next year.
Months ago.
Yeah.
Are there some districts going electric?
It's interesting because Bruce and I had a nice little conversation about it. Currently, the farthest a bus can travel with their electric batteries is 150 miles. So if they mandate that in Washington State,
We'll have to have charging points along the
It's
highway.
gonna take days
they're
to
gonna
get to our
have a
destination.
problem.
Oh,
So,
have we ever looked at, what's the other gas, natural gas buses? You know, they use propane, they use them in the cities. We ought to be looking at, anyway, not for this budget.
but anyway, that might be something to consider is getting a grant to put in a charging stations where we could charge others to charge until we needed to charge our own buses.
Or we have
And
a
then they would go,
charging,
do you remember that board from 20 years ago? They really were forward-thinking. I don't think it's gonna be for a while because they don't
yeah,
have it.
it's not
Yeah.
that good yet. And besides, look at what their pickup trucks look like.
Okay, so then questions on any of that? So then go back to
Oh,
your,
yeah, one last question. We pay for the bus when we get it?
Yeah.
Or we have paid for it?
no, we did what's called the purchase order and the
Right,
approval
right,
of
right.
it. And then
Okay, same
when
thing.
it comes in, we pay for it, yeah.
Okay.
Then go back to your miscellaneous tab. And after the general fund, the last thing we were looking at, general fund revenues, you'll see our levy spending. And I'll be bringing to you very soon what we've spent it on, all the items in the last 4 years of this 4-year levy. We've done almost everything with the exception of the bus washing station and the remodel of the Og's Gym bathrooms. And so we will be getting a list of items that we think we need to fund in the next 4-year levy so that we can start our communication to the community once we figure out how much we're going to collect. But part of that will be how much do we need and then what does it leverage? You heard about the local effort assistance. So we have this spreadsheet together and it mostly captures everything. Again, this is a plan, so sometimes we don't spend it because we might get a grant for something, or let's say that the music thinks they need $3,000 worth of supplies and they only need 1,000. There's just a lot of give and take in this, but we try to capture everything that we think we're going to spend. So you can see that the first part is about instructional materials. Then the second part is for personnel and professional development, and we have traditionally put our music teachers in there. You heard Corey talk about some of the things that the state does not fund. They do not fund our music and or art program. They do not fund our extracurricular activities. Professional development for PSE, that is something that we bargained in the last round, not this round, where we set aside funding for staff for professional development. Oh, you can see we have added pay for different things, and then We have our technology. We have a different spreadsheet for technology if you wanted to see every little line item there. And then our extracurricular activities, you can see is a good chunk of the budget at 879. And then our maintenance and operations, you can see at 470. And so some of our bigger items there that we have planned for this year, and then regular updates. So we are looking at about $2.2 million worth of expenditures, and you saw what Corey projected that we would get, but there's more in here. And then there's other areas in the budget that Jan would have to explain where it is in the line item budget, but for Insight School of Washington, we get an indirect fee. Our contract, which goes through 2028, we get 6% on the first 1,700 students and 3% on anything after the first 1,700 students. So that money becomes local money that we can use as well.
Any way we like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
It
that's
says district-wide t-shirts, $5,500. So when you buy those t-shirts in the beginning of the year, $5,500 for how many?
200.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Running short on time, we may not be getting to you.
Yeah, we're open for any ideas that you might have for a theme this year.
You guys do good
Ron, I do want you to know we have put in here to replace part of our cars. We're planning on getting some larger SUVs.
The only thing
Yeah.
that break apart,
Yeah,
rattles down the road.
I'm trying to think if there's any other big items. You know, like last year we had the lighting update on the stage. We had some pretty big items. This year we're not as large items, just smaller things.
I see transportation furniture. Aren't the buses coming with seats?
Yeah, I think that's probably, if you went into the transportation, they have some pretty old tables and office equipment, yeah, or office, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, and then, so salary and benefits, again, we're projecting 2.4 million. This includes substitute pay, projected added pay for overtime. And then in your notebooks are the salary schedules. That should be the next item that looking in the very back under miscellaneous, which looks like this.
That classified one in here.
Yes.
Gotta look at that.
Wait, let me just do the visual file.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, yeah.
So the first one is certificated. That's the 183-day certificated staff with a 6% increase. So you can see the beginning of BA, and I will tell you that in talking with Squim, Fort Townsend, PA, the going rate is right about between 59 and 60,000. We're about right where they are. And then with the top MA plus 90 maxed out at 112. And Lindsay, how many staff do we have at that level?
Oh, less than 20, probably.
Does that mean plus 90 credits?
Yes,
Mhm.
90 quarter credits,
Okay.
yes. So it takes a while to get there.
Yeah. But we could do a scatter plot to show you where our staff is on this if you're interested.
Yeah, you did that before.
My hunch would be that we have a chunk at the top that are getting ready to retire, but most are within those first 5, with maybe 30% in the middle
Middle
chunk.
road, yeah.
and what's retirement rate? 80%? When you retire, do you get 80% of your high three?
No, they top average of 5 years, and it's not 80%. It depends on how many years you have vested.
Well, let's say you have 30 years.
I can't believe you're asking me this. I have all this information in my head.
I'll get it later.
No, but there's a formula. Yeah. And at
So it's not
20
just a straight
No,
percentage of,
no, it's a weird formula. They basically take the average of the 5 years.
okay.
Somehow they weave in your years of service and then they divide it.
Mm.
Mhm. And that's what you get. This is, the next sheet in there is now the new classified, which is very detailed and different
It's very pretty.
because,
Colored.
because we bargained the additional, well, we have all the different classifications of pay, depending on the position. And then we added in, if you have the general certificate, you get 25 cents if you additional, if you have a general certificate, and that equates to taking courses, plus a specialist.
That's a fundamental course of study.
So the fundamental course of study is the first level. Usually that takes.
Everybody has to take that.
Everybody
has to get that within the first year. So I think that's 14 hours.
That
Then
is.
they go on to the general cert, which
And
is
it's another-
28 hours.
Yeah, then it's
Do they
28.
have to go to the general service?
Yes.
Yes.
Then from general cert, they go to a subject matter, which is either special ed or EL. So what we're paying them for is the general cert plus a subject matter at an additional 25 cents an hour. And then if they have their general cert plus 2 subject matters, which would be in special ed or EL, they get an extra 50 cents an hour.
So
And then if they have an associate's, they get an additional 50 cents. If they have a bachelor, then they get an additional $1.
So the dark blue is
Is
just
the
hired,
the dark blues,
just hired, don't have a fundamental course
Yes.
of study, but you have to have it by the end of that first year.
yes.
So thank you, Lindsay, for putting this massive schedule together.
So
And that's-
does Hazel get to keep track of all that?
She's gonna start learning all of this, yeah. She has this memorized by tomorrow. No. It's kind of complicated.
Maybe we can color their t-shirts.
Yeah.
Rainbow color.
And just because you do the coursework doesn't mean you get the certification, because somebody has to go in quite like they would for their teaching certificate and pay for stuff to get your certification. Then you have, but generally speaking, they got a 10% increase this next year. Then we look at the transportation. Remember, they got a 28% increase this first year. No, 25%.
Right.
For drivers and 10% for all other positions. That's mechanic, coordinator, shop foreman. So you can see the schedule there. And then the building administrator's salary schedule, and they receive what the certificated at 6%. And then you can see Kyle and me. And then you can see non-represented salary, and that's the district office. So questions on that? And again, that's about 800 and some thousand, and it did not really put a dent in our undesignated unreserved funds. And then we're very grateful in Forks, capturing our money, and then of course grateful for our ALE program. Other districts are cutting drastically right now, going into binding conditions.
Who does that? Is this OSPI the one who goes in and on these binders and tells them what to do because they need to
They
zero?
have to figure out where they're gonna borrow the money, and it's a one-time shot, and then they have to pay it back within so many. Some borrow from OSPI. OSPI sometimes won't loan because the plan isn't good enough or the district hasn't done enough. This is my understanding because we're just learning about it.
It's really like an advancement on their apportionment.
Some
It's
are.
like borrowing from a workplace or a work.
Some have capital projects, large capital project funds, and they had some project ready to go, but they borrow from that temporarily, but they also have to repay. It's like an advancement. So it kind of depends on the school district, and if they have resources within, they make them take from within. If they have none, then they apply to OSPI, but my understanding is OSPI has turned down several.
Because they're not adequate. So what happens? The school can't do it and they haven't got the resources and they just
It's unprecedented.
consolidate?
We
What'd you
don't
say?
know, it's
It's
unprecedented.
unprecedented.
Yeah, they've never
Yeah.
seen it.
The state just gonna let them do it, you know? And the state's the one that's probably caused a lot of it, not all of it, but
It's
probably caused,
32,
yeah. That just seems wrong,
32.9.
because who loses?
Yeah, and so then the only other thing is, there's three other things that, there's the timber revenue schedule that we have gone over before. And again, we haven't seen as much collection in the general fund and debt service fund, and I'll do a little bit more understanding in there. I know that we have sales out, but again, you do not necessarily collect them when the sale sells. That has to get passed by the Board of Natural Resource, and then there's a 2-year window period of when they actually log. So we may have sales out there being cut right now, and we don't see the full fruition until later on. And then the financial health of the school district, of course, this is really the first time we haven't, I think last year we had a small deficit that we're budgeting for a deficit, but I really don't think that we're gonna see that. I think we'll be pretty even. And then the $1 million question is gonna be, what do we do with our EP&O levy, really focusing on that. And so I think you should go to your county website tonight or tomorrow and pull up that tax thing and see if they doubled that one area of levy, what that would cost you, and see if you can.
It was interesting how he presented it against the ball, like the overall total. It really, I mean, if you looked at it like really big picture, it wasn't much of an increase.
And the only other piece in we're required now to do a F-195F. And that was implemented around the McCleary time because legislation felt that they couldn't keep track of the financial awareness of where schools were. So Jan puts in enrollment, and it's kind of like the 8 ball where what is going to come up when I shake this thing. It really doesn't mean a whole lot. For anybody listening to this, I hate to even say that, but really, truly, it's something that we have to do. So there's a comparison of where we think we're going to be in 4 years.
Unfunded mandate. That it? That was lovely.
That's a ton.
Well done, all of you.
But questions?
So you're gonna finalize it then?
Yeah, we're waiting
Work
on,
out some of the bugs? 22
yeah, we're waiting
billion
on
bugs?
OSPI to see if we can just move that accidental error that went from 08 or the 08 to 07, where it went from
20
contracted
22.
services to travel. If not, we have 23 million. I shouldn't even know
Overall,
about
you
that.
can't spend your bottom line, so,
Yeah,
it doesn't look very good.
anyway.
All right, so next steps, we have a
We
meeting
have our
later in the month where
budget hearing on the
we'll,
29th,
where we finalize this and,
have a regular business meeting.
well, if we can keep the regular business meeting as short as tonight's, that would be wonderful.
It'll be a doozy because we'll have all of
All
our
of it to do,
contracts
bills
and,
and-
yeah.
Okay,
Okay, well,
is all
again,
our, okay,
my team did a great job as usual.
yeah, so are
Very
we
grateful.
off
They
the,
did.
Do we adjourn this or no? That happened?
I don't know, what does it say, do I have to adjourn?
Yes.
Yep, nope, yes, we are adjourned. 7:56.
Thank you, Nathan.
Hope you feel better.
Bye, Nathan.